You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's me again, Steve Adams, or Mighty Blue, and you've found your way back to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Ryan's been working really hard recently, and he asked if I could step back in this week to cover him. Luckily enough, I knew exactly who I wanted to introduce you all to. I can't quite recall how we were introduced, but I got the chance to interview a great couple, Bill Welch and Kera Passante, recently. And they've got a terrific story to share with you. The two of them will be on in a moment. Katie's hike is continuing, and at last she's leaving Shenandoah. I know that she's taken her time, but as you're going to hear, this is the lesson the trail has taught her, and as ever, her indomitable nature comes through. Katie is on after Kera and Bill. Finally today, I'm reading the conclusion of Larry Luxenburg's Walking the Appalachian Trail. Now, I know it's been a bit disjointed in getting the book to this stage, and what with me being off some of the summer, but Larry has some wonderful insights to share, and as you listen, you'll get correlations between some of his words and part of Kera and Bill's story. I found that in reading this book, while hiking the AT has changed over the generations, the fundamentals remain, and those guys and gals who did it in the 60s, 70s and 80s experienced much of what the rest of us newer hikers experienced. Some of the parallels are quite remarkable. So let's get to it. Here are Kera and Bill. So we got a couple more of those overachievers on the show today. This is Bill Welch and Kera Passante, or Always and Sunny. Hey guys, how are you?
Hi, how are you,
Hello.
Steve?
Well, good to see you. And I mentioned you're overachievers. Did you? I know that you did the Appalachian Trail last year, which was COVID year, of course. And then, as this clearly wasn't enough for you, you decided to go on a bit of a bike ride. Where did you go?
We rode from Bar Harbor, Maine to San Diego, California.
But it wasn't just that, was it? And we're going to talk about that trip in a minute, because in a straight line, that's about 3,000 miles, 3,500 miles, isn't it? How far did you have? So having walked 2,200 miles, how far did you cycle?
About
5,400, something like that.
Yep.
So it was quite a way. So I suppose the first question must be, why on earth would you do that? Wasn't the 2,200 miles enough for you?
No, not at all.
Why now? You tell me why. I've already had this conversation with Kera, obviously, and I haven't met you before, Bill. But so tell us, what was the reason behind wanting to do this?
Well, the reason, there's so many, but I don't know. It started somewhere on the trail where we were just having the time of our lives, and we were already thinking ahead of like, oh man, this is going to end someday, and honestly, we just didn't want to go back to real life. So it's like, how can we prolong this experience? How can we do more things that we've always wanted to do? How can we change our lives? And we just started plotting and planning, and it started as like, oh, we'll just bike from Bar Harbor, Maine back to Philadelphia, where we're from. And that changed. That
sounds half sensible. I mean, that isn't unreasonable. So how did it morph? What were you doing? Sitting in a shelter one day with the rain pissing down outside, and you're thinking to yourself, I think we need to do something else.
I don't know. It's just like our dreams. We've always had like bucket dreams, but two of them were right across the country and hike the Appalachian Trail.
Fine.
So
that's nice. So we'll come to the bike ride in a minute, but let's get back to the hike and why you chose to do this, especially last year. And the reason I say that, and I've say to a lot of my friends who I interview who were in the class of 2019, we were so lucky that we had that experience because we didn't have to cope with the COVID situation. Was it just a matter of timing in your life? And we'll talk to how that worked out in a minute. So, why'd you go there in the first place?
Yeah, well, it all started with a hike on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania, where we're from, on Christmas Day in 2018. And just like all of our hikes, day hikes overnight, we always talk about one day we're going to hike this whole thing, and that's going to be so cool when that happens. And for some reason that day, I reached a threshold of talking about it. And we decided that day we were going to go home and we were going to take the first step toward planning our thru hike. And we obviously couldn't do it that season with just a couple months of planning.
Sure.
So we planned on 2020. And so it took us about 14 months to plan and train and get everything in order to leave. And we left Philadelphia on March 3rd, 2020 to head down to Atlanta, and COVID happened a week later. So we had no idea.
But you knew, it's funny, and it's tough, it's only a year and a bit ago, but it's tough to go back to that time where the world was starting to hear about this stuff and kind of knew there was COVID there. I don't think the importance really hit us until the NBA closed down. And as soon as, sports started closing down, suddenly it was like a deck of cards, wasn't it? How did it feel on the trail to be out there, knowing there's something you've been planning for quite a few months by now, obviously? How did that conversation go between the two of you, or did you also speak to other people on the trail?
Yeah, we spoke to a lot of people, and we spoke to our friends and family back home. The first week, we were very disconnected on purpose because we were sort of getting used to how much battery power do we have in our phones, and let's just completely disconnect. So our first time resupplying in town was the first time really turning on our phones, and we couldn't believe what was happening in the world.
Wow.
So we talked to other hikers. Have you seen the news? What's going on? Talked to our friends and family. Being from the greater Philadelphia area, things were pretty intense already there.
Sure.
And starting to shut down. So every day for the next few days, we were having a conversation and reflecting and weighing the pros and cons of what to do. And it wasn't a decision that we made instantly. We heard a lot of other hikers were leaving the trail. A lot of hikers who hadn't started yet were postponing their hike. And we decided with a lot of thoughtful consideration and talking with people back home that staying on the trail was the safest place for us.
I'm sure you're right. Although, as you know, and especially if you looked on Facebook, and I hope you didn't, there was so much crap. There was so much crap going on Facebook about, how selfish you were, and all, not you particularly, obviously, but how selfish people staying out there were. It was not an easy decision to make, obviously. Were you comfortable with it straight away, or did you get more comfortable with that decision as time went on?
I think we were pretty comfortable with it from the beginning. I mean, it's like you listen to the news, you listen to your family and friends, and it's like, oh, you have to stay away from people. And we see like 4 people a day. So staying away from people was super easy to do on the trail. So it didn't make sense to go back to Philadelphia. We live 40 miles outside of the downtown. So it's like there's people everywhere. You can't really get away from folks unless you just stay inside your house. And we didn't even have a house. We had no place to go. So we would be forced to go in with a family member or a friend.
Right,
and it's like, I don't want to do that. I would rather be out here where I'm in the woods, super far away from anybody.
So what had you done then? Had you sold up all your belongings and or what was the plan? Because when I went in 2019, I was homeless as well, by the way. So did you make that deliberate step? You knew you were going to be doing something different. You came back even though you didn't necessarily know what it was going to be, but you took a step with nothing to fall back on, apart from money, I'm sure, but nothing to fall back on. Right. Wow. That's kind of brave. So let's get back to that then. You decided to go on this trip, and neither of you are kids, and that sounds disrespectful. Neither of you are real youngsters, but neither of you are old fogies like me either. So how were you able to put a hold on your life? Because most people at that age are unable to do that. So how'd you do it?
I think Kira's got a really great answer for this one.
Oh, she looks confused.
I have an answer, but I don't know if it's really great. It just is what it is.
Right.
It was partially a matter of what our life is in the stage of life that we're in.
Sure.
Neither of us have kids. We did not own a home. We were renting at the time. So in terms of tying up loose ends, it was rather easy. I took a 6-month leave of absence from my job at the time. I didn't end up returning, but I was planning to. And it
Well,
just made a lot of sense.
They must have been chuffed with you. You tell them you're coming back, you decide not to, but we'll come back to that later then.
Yeah, and my boss at the time, she predicted it, that I wasn't going to come back, but I had no idea. I couldn't have predicted it. But in my career, I was starting to get more leadership, more responsibility. And if I had stayed another year, it might have just been harder and harder for me to take this hike, and I wouldn't have ended up doing it until retirement. And that's fine. Some people have to wait, but I felt as though my soul could bear it no longer. I really needed to do it.
And what about you, Bill? How could you get away?
I had a business partner, and him and I have been friends for a very long time. So he knows me inside and out, and he understood, like, I had to go do this. This was my thing. And he knew that I wasn't leading up to before the trail. Like, I wasn't happiest in the position I was in life in general.
Right.
I'd gone through a lot of changes in my life in the past 4 years, and I wasn't happy. I needed something different to do. And we both knew that this was, something different. This was a change that I needed personally. And, one thing, and I thought Kera was going to answer with this answer to your question.
You give me the right answer then.
Yeah. So people say, like, how did you put your life on pause? And this is like a misnomer, because us leaving for the trail was actually us pressing play on our life.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. So
but
now we're doing the things we love.
I'm sorry, but I want to come back to you on that, because you have no idea how the trail's going to impact you, do you? I mean, it's something that and Kera kind of said that, in that she was expecting to come back, but you don't know the impact it's going to have on you. And so you were blindly taking a step that you thought would lead literally to the next part of your life. What was that based on? Was that based on the sort of work you did as a person, or was that based just on your personalities?
Both personalities and, kind of who we are as people. It's like, I'm kind of like a meta person. So it's just like, do something, step into the unknown, where you're uncomfortable, your life's going to change no matter what. Cool.
Did you feel uncomfortable on the trail?
There were moments, but I was so comfortable out there. I loved every second of it. I was thinking about this interview last night and thinking about all the places that I've been in the past years. And honestly, I was just laying there and I was just crying in bed, because all of the places that we've been in the past year, it's just been so amazing. I'll never forget these things.
Yeah. Did you, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared for that bit. So let me think about that. Then. So you take these steps and you get into what life is going to be about for the two of you. Are you nervous about that, or is that the sort of thing that you're excited by that as a prospect? You just don't know what's going to happen. You're going to embrace it as it comes.
I think embracing it as it comes. We're both very strong people, especially in the outdoors. We do a lot of training together when it's rock climbing, biking, endurance sports. We're really into those type of adventures. So going out into the woods is just, we knew it was going to be 6 months together all the time. Yeah. And we were going to learn a lot about ourselves and each other. And
did you, as the two of you, I'm not, because you're both smiling now, so I can ask the question. How did the relationship go? Were there moments when you thought, I've just driving me crazy, or he's driving me crazy? Or did it work out that you're able to manage that part of it and get closer on the trail?
Yeah, it's definitely a eye-opening experience when you start to see patterns of what we call the grumples. So the grumples is when, if you look up what the grumple is on the internet, you'll find all sorts of silly stuff, but you'll get the point. But basically, the grumples are when I'm really hungry and I'm running super low on fuel, and Kera asks me which way should we go? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Don't talk to me ever again. Just stay away from me. And she's like, okay. I see that you might be entering the grumples. I understand. I empathize with your reaction.
That sounds incredibly patronizing, by the way, Kira.
Well, that's what happens. You understand, like, just sometimes your mind goes in ugly places and you just react without thinking about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And we learned how to communicate a lot better.
I'm sure. I'm sure it's a wonderful thing for that. If you get to be on the same wavelength, because it's not that easy. And while the 80 is obviously a large hike, the two of you have been adventuring together for some time, as you said. What have you done in the past, and how was that good preparation for the trail, or was there virtually no preparation you could do other than just getting on the trail and doing it?
We've done a lot of preparation. Bill and I have been friends for many years. We were friends before we were in a relationship with each other, and we've been taking as many adventures as possible in preparation, even before we thought we were going to hike the AT together. But We've done bike packing trips and backpacking trips no more than a week at a time prior to our AT thru-hike. So, but realistically, when you think about an AT thru-hike, you just have to be really good at doing a week trip at a time. And if you think about it that way, that's really all it is, because you're only out there for a week.
My listeners were told this. I've been told my listeners several times. I'd never hiked before when I started in 2014. And the bloke I met on the very first day said to me, you got to treat it like 4 or 5 day hikes in the woods between stops in town. Man, that totally changes your perspective, doesn't it? And that's how it turns out. So did you have to revisit your gear, or were you already dialed in? And did you find that gear worked out on a longer backing trip or not?
Oh, man. We definitely had to revisit our gear. I was just trying to think real quick. If any of the gear I had before the trip is the gear that I have now, I can't. My cell phone, probably.
So what was it about? Was it about getting lighter weight, or trying to get rid of extraneous matter that you would take before?
It was both. One of the biggest upgrades that I made was my pack. I'd never had a lightweight pack before, and that was one of the things that I saved for in the 14 months leading up to the hike, was to get a Hyperlight Mountain Gear pack, which is not cheap. And then using a combination of coupons and buying on the right day to get the lowest price. And I love that pack. And the gear accumulation has taken years. You wouldn't believe the kind of stuff that I carried with me on trips when I was first starting out. It was terrible, but you can make do with that kind of stuff. You're going to be way more uncomfortable, but then you also build a certain level of resilience. And then as you can afford better gear, lighter gear, everything just becomes easier over time. You don't have to go and spend thousands of dollars initially just to get out.
No, you're right. You don't. But I think to a degree, you realize the benefits of every extra pound or ounce you could, but not ounce, but every extra pound you can save makes so much difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us what it was like to be out there. There were fewer hikers and no trail maintenance. And I know that for me, even when I went in 2019 and there was trail maintenance, we still found trees we had to climb under and over. Was it pretty rugged out there, or did the trail seem still pretty well maintained to you?
Yeah, it was still pretty maintained.
Yeah, the only sections that were not very well maintained were in Maine. And from what I've heard, it's pretty typical to have to climb over fallen trees in some of those remote areas of Maine. So the best thing about the hike, especially early on in COVID, was the fewer amount of people. There were sections where you get up on top of a peak and look out and you don't see another human for miles. Your entire eyesight is clear of other people at places that typically are very well populated. So that was really beautiful. And that was the first 4 states on the trail. And then by end of May, things started to open up and we saw more crowds.
But I know to you were happy the fact that it was quite quiet. But you said Bill's told me before that Bill's quite an outgoing sort of guy, and he wanted to see more people. How did you cope with the solitude then, Bill? Well, the solitude of you and Kira, obviously.
Yeah, going into the trip, all I wanted to do was like hang out with the trail family, whatever that turned out to be, and I missed that in my life, and it was just like, oh man, I can't wait to like meet new people, hang out, tell jokes, like be super fun. And that just wasn't the reality. And my
Sure.
expectation was so far off. And I just adjusted my expectation, and it really made for better bonds, at least in my mind, with the people that we did run into. And I know for me, like some of the people we would run into, man, I would judge them like, oh, this and that, like they're this, they're that. And by like the third day, you just keep running into them. And then the fourth day, you're just like best friends with them. And you just have this bond with them that you'll never forget. And even if you don't ever see them again, you could call them up 25 years from now and be like, hey, remember that time?
Totally, totally. And in fact, the judgmental gene does take a bit of a knocking, doesn't it? You know,
So bad.
we're all judgmental to some degree, but being out on the trail with somebody when they've done the same thing as you, you know, there's a mutual respect there, which I think really carries through the whole way. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but in 2020, as there were less people, were there more animals? Did you see lots of animals on the trail or not?
Yes, that was like the absolute coolest part of it. The animals you could, well, there's like two parts. So the animals were just out and about doing their thing. You could tell they weren't being spooked, like
Yes.
especially in the Shenandoahs. Like it was all closed. There was no one there. There's not a single person in the Shenandoah that wasn't a thru hiker, and there was like 10 people. So
Wow.
the deer would just come wander around. You could just walk up next to them. The birds were all migrating by that time, all the little songbirds, and they were just everywhere. But the really interesting part was the bears, the mice, the raccoons. They were out doing what bears, mice, and raccoons should do, which is forage for their own food, not off of human food.
Exactly.
So when we were at shelters or near shelters, we didn't encounter raccoons or anything. We didn't see any bears at our campsites, not once, because there was no people. There was no food for them to come look for. So it was kind of like both. Like, yes, they were out there, but they also were not where people typically have problems with them.
And Kira, did you find that in towns, the town attitudes were different to you perhaps than they may have been in other years? Because especially during the early months of the hike, I think things relaxed in July and August time, even though perhaps they shouldn't have done. Did you find there was an anti-hiker bias in some of the towns you went to?
Person to person, no. All of our interactions with people in town were absolutely wonderful and friendly. And we did limit our stays in town a lot,
Sure.
especially in the first half, by taking 7 to 8 days worth of food out with us at a time and just carrying the weight so that we didn't have to stop. We could stop half the time. But I do recall when we went into Hot Springs, North Carolina, which is normally a favorite place for hikers to stop there because the trail goes right through the town. And as soon as we got off the mountain and into the town, there was one of those electric signs saying something along the lines of "hikers go home."
Oh my
And
God.
we were like, oh no, this is terrible. And everything in the town was closed down except for a couple shops, and we did our resupply and got out of there as fast as we could because
Yeah.
at that point there were a lot of rumors about hikers getting kicked off, but there was no confirmation of that, and we were just fearful at that point.
I'm sure you were, yeah, because once you're invested in this hike, you want it to be done. I mean, it would have been so disappointing if they said there's no way you're going past this point. It would have been terrible. And getting resupply, I know one or two people obviously get packages from home, but were the post offices always open?
They were with their typical hours
Right,
for
yes,
the most part.
There's
Some
another
of them
bonus here.
some of them did have shortened hours. It didn't affect us too much. We did some packages throughout the trip, but mostly we were doing spontaneous resupply as needed and sort of going with the flow. We lost one package, I think, over
Not
the
bad.
entire trip. We have no idea where it is. We still don't know. We know there's a block of cheese in there.
Well, I bet
And,
that's smelling good now.
I know. I feel bad for whoever's going to open it one day,
Exactly.
if it's ever found.
So you eventually got there, got to Katahdin, amazing mountain to climb. It makes always, whenever I even think about it and talk about it, it always makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So for you though, so put it back, for me, there were a lot of people up there. obviously, that day for me. For you, there probably weren't. Was it just the two of you, or were there a few others with you at the time?
There were a few others. That morning, we got up pretty early, and we actually hiked up to Katahdin with another hiker named Toucan, who actually was finishing his through hike over 4 years of doing long sections.
Nice.
So that was really great to share that moment with him. And when we got to the top, there were a few familiar faces of a guy who owns a hostel in Maine and his family. And besides that, another family was up there. And so it was actually quite intimate. After being up there for about 30 minutes and getting our photos taken, the crowd really started to come in. So it did seem like there were a lot of people there, but just hiking a little bit later in the day. And then a storm came through and everyone sort of mass exodus. Yeah.
So, Bill, what was it like to finish with somebody you love? I can imagine it must be so different to, that personal journey yourself, and you call the person you love, but yours was right next to you. So what was it like for you to touch that sign? You're obviously the emotional one, by the way.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It was really interesting, like the few days, like going through the 100-mile wilderness towards the end, you could, like, I felt like the emotions kind of like bottling up. I remember we would take like kind of easy days just hanging out by the streams.
Yeah.
I had some fishing lines, so I would catch some fish along the way.
Nice.
And I started crying, like for sure, like a few days before. And when we got to that like base camp at Katahdin, where all the hikers are supposed to stay before they go up and register and everything, I took like one walk down to the little pond stream to scoop some water, and I cried a little bit there, but that was it. Like when we got to the top, we walked with our friend Toucan, who we've been on and off with, and when we got to the top, it was like, I looked at Kara, I was like, that was it. And it wasn't the destination. The destination really had like no effect on me at all. It was all the journey.
Interesting. You're not the first person to say something like that. And for me, it was, thank God I'm not dead. As soon as I touched it, I was relieved I was still alive. But also the other thing for you, of course, you had, whether it was 2,000, 1,000, 5,000 miles, you said another big journey to do. Did you take the time to celebrate Katahdin, or did you just get straight on to Bar Harbor?
So I'll share this part.
Okay.
We did not have a plan for a ride out of Baxter State Park, but we got a hitch with a guy who was just so kind and so excited that we had just finished it. And he took us into Millinocket. And we were planning to stay a few days at the AT Lodge.
Yeah.
And we were so excited. And I think that's typically what hikers do. And so we went there and we were so excited to stay a couple days and relax. And as soon as we walked in, the person checking us in said, just so you know, there's been a COVID outbreak in town due to a wedding, and that you shouldn't stay. So we were exhausted.
Oh my God.
We've been up since 4 a.m. and just climbed like the hardest and highest mountain in Maine. And we were like, we had already started to release and relax. And then she's like, nope, you don't want to stay here. So we stayed one night and got a shuttle out of Millinocket as soon as we could the next day. But then we got a ride to Bar Harbor and we rested there.
So you got to Bar Harbor and you finished. Sorry, what date did you finish at Katahdin?
August 24th.
I finished on the 23rd, funny enough, the year before.
Oh, yay.
23. But I started well before you. So August 24th. When did you start the bike ride?
August 27th.
Oh, you're crazy. I mean, you didn't have much. I mean, that's ridiculous. We
would have stayed in Bar Harbor longer, but it was expensive.
There was so many people.
It's often an excellent reason to get out of anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was
you
more
got any
people
bikes
than we've ever seen there. It's
Oh
crazy.
my gosh. Really? Wow.
Yeah. Bar Harbor's like, I was there when I was a kid and I had all these like fantasies of like this old fishing town that it used to be. Nope. Not anymore.
So you got on your, these were your own bikes. You had them shipped up, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
So these are prepared bike packing bikes. So you get on the bike, and I'm sure that your legs were in great shape for the bike ride, but the AT is also quite debilitating, especially for men on the upper part of your body. Did you notice differences from your previous bike rides, physically?
Oh, I felt a lot weaker getting on the bike that first day. The first hill, I almost cried. I had to tell myself, you'll get stronger in a few days. It didn't take long to get our biking legs back, though.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So talk us through your ride. Where did you head first then? Did you actually do that ride down to Pennsylvania and then head further west?
Yeah, so once we got to Bar Harbor, we had all our stuff shipped to the bike shop, and we literally spent like the 3 days sitting out front of the bike shop, putting all our stuff together. Like we just spent 3 days just in the hot sun in Maine, just putting all the pieces together. And people are looking at us like, why do you have backpacks? Why do you have bike packing stuff? Like, what are you guys doing? You're insane. You look like you're living outside. And it's like, yes, we actually do live outside. Running stuff back to the post office. And we wanted to go to Acadia. That was our plan. It was like to go through the national park there.
All right, nice.
We've heard so much cool stuff about it.
Right.
But by the time we finally got all our stuff settled, it was like, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
3:30.
3:30, and the park shuts down at like 6 or something. So we got to the gate, and they're like, "Yes, it's like $35." And
my gosh.
The park closes in an hour and a half, and we're like, no, we can't. We just can't do it. Like I want to spend time in the park, so. Regrettably, we did not ride through the park, so we rode around the park.
That's not an easy start then, because you've had the. I'm seriously, you get these fantastic feelings when you of achievement, accomplishment when you finish an AT hike, and you immediately are starting another journey, and you immediately have a disappointment. I don't think it's a great combination of things. So that.
It's so funny.
And it's always seemed dangerous to me to be on a bike with some of the thoughtless drivers around these days, texting and looking at Facebook and such like. Did you have any scary moments on the bike in terms of, cars getting way too close to you, or did you try to stay away from main roads? Or I don't even know how you negotiate across the country for 5,000 miles.
I would say like that was a big struggle for me in the first week. The first like real day of being on our bike hiking through Maine, every like 20 minutes, I just kept thinking about my mortality. You spend your days in the woods where like your life is never threatened.
That's right. Yeah.
But then every time you hear a diesel truck come by, you're like, oh my God, my God, here it comes. And the smells from being on the road, I was choking. I couldn't believe how I'd adjusted to being in the woods. And then being on the road next to cars and exhaust fumes all day. Oh, so terrifying.
It's quite a juxtaposition, that, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah.
What about, did you camp by the road? I don't even know what bike packing is. I understand the concept, but what do you do? Do you stay in state parks, or do you just camp by the road? And if you did camp by the road, did that feel secure?
You do
it's
all
a combination. Yeah.
All right. But you felt pretty secure with all that stuff.
It was hard in the Northeast because, the whole Northeast corridor is really, really populated, and it's
privatized.
Just private land everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
So honestly, that was the next disappointment of the first leg of our trip was you got to go to a hotel. There's no place to sleep.
Right.
There's just not. Unless you go to a private campsite, and they're going to charge you $60 to put your tent down.
Sure. But that improved. But that improved as time went on, did it, when you went further west?
Yes.
So you eventually got there, which is great. And when I asked Kera what her takeaways from the trip were, she referred to she learned how to solve problems, but she said that yours were different. I don't know if she told you this. So what about you, Bill? I mean, what did you take away from the trip?
I was thinking about this question when she told me, and the biggest takeaway is that life is not black and white. I've always been it either is or it isn't type of person, and I have found out that it is much better and safer in terms of like my emotions to just live in the gray area. Because then you don't have these expectations of yes or no. If you just have an expectation that it could be either or,
Yeah.
you're a lot better off. At least I am anyways. And I remember we would, have arguments about like, we have to do this or we have to do that. And it's like, no, we don't have to do anything. Or like, I can't do this or I can do that. And it's like, no, let me just make a choice and be okay with it. And now I have the power to make a choice.
That is cool. And you're clearly not homeless now, unless you're staying with friends right now, because you're in a home. I can see. Kira looks like she's by a swimming pool somewhere, and you're inside a home. So obviously life settled down a little bit. But I know you're off to do the long trail very shortly. In fact, a couple of weeks soon, very soon. In fact,
less than a week. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, less than a week.
And that there are more adventures ahead. Has the experience of the last year plotted you a bit of a path for the next, say, 5 years? What do you plan to do with this? Because I know you've already said, Kira, you see your future being in this sort of realm, as it were. So what are your plans?
Well, in addition to doing the long trail next week, we do have a bunch of new goals for hikes and big bike rides in the next couple years, but they're not really set in stone. Our next big series of trips that we want to take is a PCT northbound thru-hike, and then follow it with a southbound Great Divide mountain bike route trip. So another hike then bike trip. And whether that happens next year or the year after. I can't see that catching on at all. Oh my God, what a nightmare.
Oh, it's so much fun though.
Oh, I'm sure it is, but I'm sure it is my age. I'm exhausted when I finish a long hike. Absolutely exhausted. I'm doing the John Muir Trail next month or month after next, cool. And I'm going to be exhausted after 200 miles. The thought of getting on a bloody bike for 1,000 miles. So what is the bike part of that trip after the PCT then?
So the Great Divide mountain bike route, also Great Divide mountain bike race, is how it started. It goes from Banff, Canada, all the way down to Antelope Wells, New Mexico. So it kind of follows the PCT. It kind of follows the Continental Divide. Yeah, the Continental Divide hiking trail. It more follows the Continental Divide hiking trail because you could also bike those sections. So it's like forest road, single track, double track. It's kind of a mishmash of things.
That does sound lovely. And I biked all my life, and I've never bike packed, obviously. And you intend to turn this into some sort of business type thing. I wasn't quite sure what Kira was saying before, so that's my stupid fault, I guess. So what are the plans business wise? What do you want to do with it?
So we're always hearing, whether it's like bike packing or Appalachian Trail, I wish I could do that. I wish I could be like you guys. You're my dream people. I want to be like you. And frankly, we're both tired of hearing these things from people because it's such a limiting mindset. So we want to help people who have the dream of completing a thru hike. We want to help them, give them the tools and skills that they need to do so. Because it really is a hard task. I mean, it took us 14 months to figure it out. And we know all you have to do is walk. But like when you prepare and you train, you're going to have so much more fun because you're not so much worried about like your body and your mind. You can actually do the fun things that you may want to do when you're out there. So we're kind of at the moment just in a beta program where we're working with people one-on-one. And, if anybody's interested in learning how that they can get out on the trail, give us a call, contact us online.
I'm going to put your contact details in the show notes anyway. I think what you've done is amazing personally. It's not something I would ever consider, although I love the idea of a bike ride. But I can't imagine that my old body's up for it now anyway. So I wish you the best of luck on the long trail. I wish you the best of luck on the PCT. How are you going to start a business, by the way, when you're doing these long trails? I just have no idea either. But I wish you the best of luck on each and your ventures as well. And I appreciate you coming on the show.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. It's been great chatting.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
They are exhausting to listen to, aren't they? I could have no more gone for a 5,000-mile bike ride after my hike than I could have played tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at any time in my life. Yet they're adventurers, and this is what they do. I love that spirit, and I particularly like what Bill answered when I asked them about putting their lives on hold. They felt like they weren't putting their lives on hold. They were turning on their lives. What a great attitude. Oh yeah, and when we finished the recording, Bill started to tell me how they got their trail names, and, well, let him tell you himself. My bad. I meant to ask them, especially when I saw what their names were, why they're Always and Sunny. And Bill perked up when I said that. He said, it's a funny story, so he's now going to tell us, or Kira's going to tell us.
Go ahead, Bill.
All right. So we were right before Blood Mountain in Georgia. Uh-huh. And like leading up to that, we're just like, man, when are we going to get our names? When are we going to get names? That's what everybody wants to know when they're at that point. Like, who am I? Who am I? Who was I? You know, like that's what everybody wants to know. So anyway, we're at the gap right before Blood Mountain, and there's all sorts of trail magic there. Woody Gap. And somebody's passing out Monster Energy drinks, like big ones. And we take one and we drink it each.
Good,
and it's
good
like
idea.
3:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then we go across the street, same deal, more Monster Energy drinks. We take it with us, drink a little bit on the way. And we look at each other like, man, we probably shouldn't have done that because it's middle of the afternoon and we are now very deep in Monster Energies. So we were like, well, we're never going to sleep. And we just walked up and over Blood Mountain in the middle of the night. And it was beautiful. It was a full moon. The sky was beautiful, so clear. No headlamps, just the light of the moon. Wow. And it was glorious. When we got to the top, it was like, whoa, this is quite spectacular. And I know this is a bit of a long-winded version, but I think it's totally worth it. So we get to the top. There's that shelter up there, that stone shelter.
I should point out to listeners, by the way, that Kira's just leaned back in a chair. She knows it's going to be a little while, so you carry on, Bill.
The long version.
We get up to the stone shelter, and I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. We just hiked up in the middle of the night, and there were some people up there, and these two young guys were up there, and they were, asking us like what we were doing, where'd we come from, and this and that. And we're like, yeah, we got to go down to the other side of the mountain because we hear there's a place to camp down at the store down
Nils
there.
Gap.
Mountain Crossings. Yeah, Nils Gap, yeah.
With all the trees. And we were like, well, we're probably going to go camp there because we hear that's a nice place to go. But we have no idea how to get there because the signage and everything's really hard to get down on that side of the mountain at night. And these two kids were like, sure, no problem. We'll take you down. So we had these really nice guides that took us down, told us all about the region and how the Native Americans used to fight for Blood Mountain because it was spiritual and it was super amazing. Yeah. We got down to the crazy tree with all the shoes in it. And I don't know, it was like 11 o'clock at night or something. I'm not sure what time it was. It was dark, and it's been dark for quite some time, and it's cold. And we start looking around, and I can see a fire and some people down off like to the side. And we're like, all right, let's go check it out. And we go talking to these guys, and they're drinking and they are just having a good time hanging out. And they are friends of people that work at the store there. We're like, hey, where can we sleep? We just hiked over the mountain and we're really tired and we want to go to bed like now. And they're like, yeah, there's like some camp spots like up the mountain a bit. Just keep walking and you'll find it.
All right.
And we did. We walked up there. We didn't find anything. And we walked back down. We're like, hey guys, we just spent the last hour looking. There's nothing. And they're like, okay, you can sleep here next to us, next to this fire. Just like go sleep there behind the shed. So we did, chatted them up a little bit, told them who we were. We're Bill and Kira. We're from Philadelphia. That was it. We went to bed. Wake up in the next morning. They're up already around the fire, cooking and everything. And they're like, hey guys, I know you told us your names last night, but we don't remember your names. We just knew that you're from Philadelphia, so all night we've been calling you Always and Sunny because of the hit TV show Always and Sunny in Philadelphia.
Excellent. That's you can't lose those then. That is so good. Oh, well, thanks for that.
I hope it was worth the wait.
It was. I'm not always up on the cultural references over here, but as soon as they stress Philadelphia, even I got it. Lovely to hear an origin story, isn't it? If you recall, a few weeks back, I told you that I'd be starting a Patreon page when I get back to doing the show full time in October. I'm still working on ideas for the page and how I can pay back some of the kindnesses you've given me. However, one thing is clear. This show, in fact all our shows, take a lot of time and effort to put out to you. Most of all, though, it costs me money. Given that we don't currently have sponsors to the show, I hope you'll consider becoming a patron so that we can continue to bring these great shows to you. Thanks this week goes to recurring donors Lisa Rana, Brian Helton Jr. and Erskine Bass. While we had a lovely donation this morning from Doris Purcell, who told me, I listened to just a section hiker. Thanks, Doris, and thanks everybody else. So now we've got Katie's update, and I'm sure she's frustrated with the progress, but as you'll hear, her mindset has changed so much since she started, and she's really getting an understanding of the trail and its rhythms. Here's Katie. Well, we're back on with Katie, and I think it's still in Shenandoah, is that right?
Yep, I'm at the north end.
You must like it
tomorrow.
there.
It would seem so. Tomorrow, so today's my last full day in the Shenandoahs. So tomorrow I start in the Shenandoahs and then head out of the Shenandoahs. So soon we'll be on the roller coaster.
Oh, right. That's something to look forward to, if nothing else. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Have you practiced there at all, been to the roller coaster?
Have I been to the roller coaster? No.
Yeah.
I've never been there.
It's fun.
I'm getting in. I think it'll be fun. It's not huge ascents and descents. It just looks like there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. They're bloody endless, let me tell you. They are really. So,
you're right.
So, I was thinking about this the other day. You're still there and still obviously moving along. But I mean, what are you up to now? What are you working on right now? How many hours a day are you walking?
So today I'm doing 11 miles.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, this will be my biggest day. And then tomorrow it'll be 10 or so, maybe 10 to 10 and a half. I can't remember what tomorrow is, but I'll go into the first shelter, after I get out of the park. And then my next goal will be to Bear's Den Hostel. Looking forward to that.
That's great. Yeah. I camped on the grass. Outside of Bear's Den. I was a cheapskate that particular day.
Yeah.
But you can use the facilities there, so it's great.
It.
Yeah. So how? I mean, I know I keep asking this, and I don't want this to be samey for people, but I still feel that you haven't been allowed to really get going in this. But 11-day
Mm-hmm.
walk is a considerable achievement. And how is the knee feeling?
Yeah.
Right? How's the knee feeling right now?
The knee's fine. I think the knee is fine. I think it's just making sure that I really am taking care of my body. And so, I have been going slow. I've added weight to my pack up to about 15 or so pounds. Sure. And then my hope is to not have it over 21 pounds with summer gear in there. So, we'll see if I can keep it down to that. And, I feel like, as long as I am putting those breaks in, every hour or so, getting a load off, that I'll be fine.
How has this changed? How has this period, the time you've spent on and off the trail, I guess, how has it changed your mindset so far? Or because this is an entirely different hike to what you expected, I'm sure.
It is different, and I actually am happier. I feel, I'm enjoying it more. I feel like I'm seeing more, and it's less of a competition with myself and more of just really, loving the experience. And so, I think I'm definitely in a better place mentally, I think, than I was. And, I'm excited because this next part So all of the southern part of the Appalachians, I've hiked on and off throughout all of that. So,
Sure.
but after tomorrow, I'm heading into areas I've never been. So I'm super excited to see what that looks like and what that's going to bring.
And what has it done? And it doesn't appear to have affected your enthusiasm for the whole thing. In many ways, in many ways, is that because of your natural sunny nature, or you just accepted the trail for what it's done, not done to you, what it's given to you this year?
Well, you could, and I do have moments where I was really frustrated and
Sure.
kind of angry or upset, but it's not gonna help me get to Katahdin to do that. So I really do. I want to get to Katahdin, and I want to see this trail for all that it has to offer. So I feel like I know what caused the stress fracture. I know what I did to bring that on myself.
Sure.
And now it's up to me to take what I've learned from that and make it now work.
Yeah.
So that's where I am, and I think in that way I am wiser.
It gives us wider lessons, doesn't it, than just hiking.
Right.
And funny enough, there was a post yesterday in Dix's Facebook page at Homemade Wanderlust, and it was someone saying to me. Someone saying to people, rather, he said, "No, really, folks, why do you do this? What is it about this?" And what I thought was great about it, and I think it's probably because Deanna McGregor really looks after some of the comments in there, won't allow certain things to be said. But I thought it elicited some fantastic answers, and people do this for so many different reasons. And I think in your case, you appear to be finding different reasons for doing it than when you first came out, aren't you?
Yes, I would say. When I first came out, it was still about the naturalist perspective of, watching the seasons and got flies landing on me, watching the flies and bees are eating the salt off my skin.
Yeah.
The naturalist aspect of it, but also, it was about seeing if my body could handle the challenge, and I was. In that way, I really feel like I ignored the messages that my body was giving me to achieve some kind of, arbitrary challenge to myself. So that part of that aspect has changed. I don't need to set some arbitrary challenge for myself. Of course, I do, want to do this whole trail. And,
Absolutely.
In order for me to do the whole trail, I have to be a little wiser. And certainly every day is a challenge out here, but, it doesn't have to break your bones.
And on the podcast in the past, I've always told people, no, they'll get the physicality eventually. Have you been surprised at how physical the trail can be to you? I mean, had it not been for your stress fracture, the rest of the physicality seems to be okay for you, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's doable. You said it early on that if you could walk, what'd you say? Like if you can walk
200 yards without oxygen. Yeah.
That's right. You can do this trail. So I wouldn't want to discourage anyone from getting out there and trying it and doing it. And you just have to kind of be smart about it.
So in retrospect, and I know you certainly wouldn't be knocking anybody you've hiked with, because you've always taken not so much the blame, but you've certainly taken the responsibility of what's happened to you.
Right.
What would you have done differently from day one?
Probably I would have definitely taken it slower. Definitely taken it. Doing those lower miles for much longer. Yeah. I increased it way too fast, and no doubt that's, and it felt, I was excited. I liked it. I was proud of the achievement. It was all those things, but, it's just, you got to be smart. And you can't will yourself through it. I maybe if you're 30, you can, but not my age. You're not going to will yourself.
I think at our respective ages, you're a little younger than I am, but I think however much you think you can keep up with these youngsters, you just can't, can you? So
exactly.
and it's the one thing I think of all the things when people write to me quite often talking about the trail, and they'll ask me certain questions, and I always say if there's ever just one single piece of advice I'd give people, it's to start off slowly, because you just have to get used to it. You think you're fine, but you're really not. And I always remember with hiker hunger, thinking to myself, oh my God, I hope that kicks in soon. I'm not hungry at all, but you're burning so many calories, you need it. And I was, the fat was melting off me when I first started.
Yes.
And so you don't realize how much you're burning. So all these things you don't realize are happening to your body are happening to your body. And yet everyone tells you start slowly, and yet you still didn't. And it's kind of one of those things.
I know.
Oh, dear.
I know. Yeah, I have asked myself, well, what's wrong with you?
Well, it's funny, Katie. I wondered whether this would actually put you off, but in many ways it appears to have just adjusted your perspective and made you want it more, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Steve. This is, every day is a privilege to be out here is my perception, the way I see it. Not everybody gets to do this.
No.
And I run into people who want to do it, who've said they want to do it or they wish they had done it. And, and so I know it's a privilege to be out here doing this. So for me, that's, just don't lose sight of that. That's right. That is indeed the case.
Well, so, I'm now looking forward in the next couple of weeks to talking to you about, what the trail is holding for you, because, the roller coaster, and don't ignore what looks like an easy day or two, because it is up and down. It is endless.
Yeah.
But, just enjoy it. Take your time and get over those mountains, and then curse when you get to the top of them every time.
That's right. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Bears Den as well, which is a terrific place to be. And I don't know whether you know this, whether you're even a beer drinker. There's some great breweries around that area, up and down that area. So just try some of them out. It's worth going to. Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I think a cold beer sounds really good. That's right. Okay. Well, look, enjoy the rest of your week. I'm pleased you're actually leaving Shenandoah last. And by the way, just to keep our record up to date, still no bears? No bears, but you know what? I've seen a lot of suicidal millipedes, sacrificial millipedes along the trail. So no bears. Yeah. You never know. It'll happen when you least expect it. You go around the corner and one could be looking. That's right. Just looking straight at you. Over my shoulder right now. Oh dear. Okay, Katie. Well, look, take it easy. And right, obviously Steve, you now know that's the thing to do. And just enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of this next week. All right. Thanks, Steve. Cheers. Talk to you soon. Yeah. Bye. Okay. Bye-bye. I thought that was a really valuable lesson for those of you thinking of hitting the trail next year. Katie knew that she shouldn't go too fast too early, yet to keep up with Tremley, she stopped hiking her hike and started hiking someone else's. You'll know what I think about that, so you think about it whenever you're out there. Finally today, it's the last chapter of Larry Luxemburg's book, and as I mentioned earlier, it has had lessons that apply as much today as they did back then. It was another of those readings where I found myself nodding in agreement pretty much all the time. I'm going to be here again in 2 weeks' time. But Ryan, we'll see you next week. Smiles in our hearts. Life after the trail. Raised on the Illinois prairie, I still see with awe every mountain and valley, forest, ledge, and bold mountain brook and noisy cascade. I have nothing but happy memories of my Appalachian Trail hike, and what a store of them I have. Phyllis DeMille, 1984 Trail Report to the ATC. For 4 to 6 months, your world consists of following the white blazes. It's hard but simple. Your life boils down to a routine tightly focused on the basics: food, shelter, health, companionship, and natural beauty. Your only possessions are the few you can tote on your back. Then all of a sudden, you're done. You've climbed the final mountain. You've achieved the goal that seemed hopelessly far away only a few short months ago. Instead of that simple focus, you now have none. As Pete woulda, coulda, shoulda, Susie puts it, the blazes in real life are harder to follow. You have the biggest appetite of your life, which will persist for up to 2 weeks after you finish. You're in the best shape of your life, but that won't last long when you stop spending 10 hours a day climbing mountains with a heavy pack on your back. After a thru-hike, things that everyone else takes for granted seem magnificent to you. Turn on the tap and fresh water comes out. Flush toilets. Staying clean is a snap. Garbage cans nearby. Refrigerators are nice, but you must adjust to whizzing around in cars after months of 2-mile-an-hour days. You are not the same person as the one who began in Georgia last spring. You try to explain, but you have little more success than you did last winter when you try to explain why you must do this. You mention the good times you had with Rerun, Cool Breeze and Sprained Rice, and your family only wonders why these people don't have real names. You say that sometimes you had the best days of your life and on other days suffered the most exquisite misery you have ever endured. But every day, good and bad, is etched firmly in your memory. It was a time when you lived fully, a time of adventure and stimulation, a time when you tested yourself and found that you liked the answer, a time when you reached inside and found that you were made of stronger stuff than you ever thought possible. You had your dream and you lived it. You're relieved that it is over, sad that it came to an end, proud that you did it, and grateful that you had the chance. And you wonder, how have I changed? What will I do now? And perhaps, will I ever again do this trail, this hike, this adventure? After more than 2,000 miles on the trail, you can expect to undergo some personality changes. A heightened affinity for nature infiltrates your life. Greater inner peace, enhanced self-esteem, a quiet confidence that if I could do that, I can do and should do whatever I really want to do. More appreciation for what you have and less desire to acquire what you don't. A childlike zest for living life to the fullest, a refusal to be embarrassed about having fun. A renewed faith in the essential goodness of humankind, and a determination to repay others for the many kindnesses you have received. If you haven't had an intense experience on the trail, you missed something, said Mike Hago Harrington. It has redirected the way I'm living my life. I'm working less and hiking more. I quit teaching in 1985, said Henry Phillips, who hiked the trail in the early 80s. I hear a lot of teachers complain, but keep doing it. I would have never quit before the trail. I realise now's the time to do something different. I'm selling welding supplies and I enjoy it a lot more. Being on the trail at extended time gives you a different perspective. Little things don't bother you as much, like a train being a little late. The trail put me at ease. I had been a CPA, now I'm a mailman, said Dick Pottiger. I learned that the less stuff you carry, the more you enjoy your hike, and that carries over into life. We got rid of the big house and simplified our life. The trail slowed me down and gave me new directions. By the time thru-hikers finish, they have a lot in common, Dick said. It mellows everybody out. It redefines their values. I always thought I'd like to do other things, but now I'm trying to figure out how to do the 80 again. I don't know of anything that compares to an 80 thru-hike. My fellow thru-hikers told me that I seemed to enjoy thru-hiking more than anyone that was out there that year, said Laurie Mountain Laurel Pottiger, who married Dick a few years after a hike. I definitely was gung-ho about it. I knew I wanted to work here, ATC. The trail and thru-hiking has meant so much to me. I couldn't understand people who would say, well, this is one of the many goals I have, and after I do the AT, I go on to do something else. I have more memories than there were miles, said Mitch Breeze Keeler. I'm more excited now about the trail than when I started. Such a great experience is earth-shattering. You can't conceptualize what a change in your life you'll have from hiking the trail. You change one step at a time. Mitch said he never returned to the corporate world and has instead become an outdoor educator. Hiking the trail has had a tremendous effect on her life, Laurie, a travelling Wilbury, Mac, said. She felt she could do anything after a thru-hike. She even helped build a cabin for herself. The idea of the cabin happened on the trail. I would not have had the confidence before the trail to attempt something like that. I'd have said, that's a good idea, but... So instead, I just did it. For many people, the end of the trail signals a new struggle. Disorientation and mild depression are common soon after finishing. Those who lack firm attachments, such as job or mate, seem to suffer the most. Some dislike that their achievement is not celebrated in the real world. Susan Gale Airy found that her finely polished wilderness survival skills were of no benefit or relevance in her office job. It hurt to be away from nature, she said. I would hear paper crinkling and think a mouse was after my food. It was like shell shock. I would see a white mark and think I had to follow the blazes. People don't tend to understand. You're almost apart from society, said Wayne Gross. You're not in tune with things when you go back. At the end I felt strange and numb and disoriented, said Ralph the Hobbit Goodenough. In the shower, watching the last of the trail dirt run down the drain, I cried and cried. It was wonderful. At first, Ralph felt cut off from the trail community. Now, he said, I go back to the trail and feel part of it, even when I hike short distances. After I got off the trail, I had a horrible adjustment, really bad, said Laurie Mack. I was feeling that no one understands me. I was alienated from everyone, almost like I was a spectacle. Last summer, a friend from the trail and I were talking about adjusting, and he said he's just starting to be comfortable talking about his trail experiences. The first night back, I sat on the couch, said Leonard habitual hiker Atkins. I was vibrating. I called a friend, drove 50 miles and camped out in a wilderness area. I'd hear newspapers rattling and think it was a mouse. My first few nights I took a pad out on the front porch and slept out there. Now I'm able to come home after a trip without having those adjustment problems. I didn't realise it was the Alcoholics Anonymous slogan, but I adopted it. Accept each day. Change what you can change and accept what you can't. It made a difference in my life. I was fighting things. When life throws you that curve, you accept it. If it's something that could be changed, it should be changed. I realise I can pretty much do what I want to do. If I try something and fail, at least I tried. A year after a second thru-hike, Ginny Spirit Walker Frost said she still hasn't adjusted. It's hard. It's always hard. It takes 3 to 6 months to get your life together again. All of a sudden, it's gone. There's a huge hole in your life. When things weren't going well, I'd indulge in trail memories and trail dreams, Ginny said. I keep it alive because I want to. In 1991, a year after his thru-hike, Arthur AB positive Batchelder hiked the AT in Georgia. We met a guy who'd hiked the trail 10 years before, and he's never held a steady job since. He said his record was a year or two. He just could not get into that routine of every day the same place. Pete Soucy ended his 1984 thru-hike with 6 other people. 6 months later, none had permanent homes or full-time jobs. 2 were in South Carolina, trimming trees and living out of a pickup truck. 1 was in Europe on a peace march. 1 was living in a garage. Pete himself had advanced from sleeping outdoors in sub-freezing weather on the campus of the University of Maine to a caretaking job that permitted him to sleep in the greenhouse. Did the hikes change my life? Said Albie Pokrop, one of Pete's 1984 partners, who also hiked the AT in 1978 and 1980. How could they not? The lifestyle, learning to be patient, dealing with so much weather. I learned that all those things will pass. If it's cloudy now, it's always sunny ahead. My whole outlook in life is pretty much determined by that first thru-hike. He's gone on to mountaineering, climbing Denali in Alaska and working at weather stations on Mount Washington and in Antarctica. When I left the AT, I was in the best shape of my life, said Rod Kinley, a 1973 southbound thru-hiker, but it was disappointing being separated from my trail friends. I was upset by it. It would have helped if we'd had a club, older, like they do now. Greg Pooh Nertner was another thru-hiker who found his post-trail adjustment difficult. I expected to come back into society and be much more well-adjusted and not take things too seriously, because that's the way I'd been on the trail. But I got back to the real world and was just overcome by how superficial it is and how many stupid little things you hear all the time. I guess I was bitter. I couldn't get a job, but I adjusted and I learned to be happy with less. I started getting more outdoor jobs. Now I feel perfectly well adjusted. I don't know if I've lost that special feeling that you have right after getting off the trail, or whether I've been able to reconcile that special feeling with the way the world really is and accept it. Introducing his girlfriend, Juliana, whom he met while working at Harper's Ferry, Greg laughed and said, "The trail just seems to keep bringing great things to me." On the trail, he said, he matured a lot, became more easygoing and accepting, just mellowed a lot. I was a type A, probably still am, but a mellower type A, reformed. The end of the trail was a really tough time for Scott the Mountain Beavers, who hiked in 1992. I thought I'd hike the trail and then go right back. It didn't work out that way. I didn't work for 3 months, and I didn't have a place to live for 2 months. The first night I slept alone in a house. I had a feeling of despair. I was back into the mainstream. The experience was over. Dick Lotek Gislik hiked the trail over 2 summers. After the first year, I had a deep depression when I had to go off, he said. I felt disassociated from the rest of the world. I had a bad time the whole next year. Now that some time has passed, he's happy he did the trail. Most people would say it's the best thing they ever did, he said. It's a way to see the US in a very special way, in the backcountry. You see it like the pioneers did. By the end of the trail, you can walk through a brick wall. You're in such good shape. Some hikers have a hard time putting their sleeping bags away. Many are reluctant to sleep indoors, and those who do often end up in a sleeping bag on the floor. Some are startled for weeks by the sound of flush toilets and other loud noises. AT memories remain vivid long after the hike. People who can't remember what they had for breakfast can recall details of their AT adventure 2 decades later. It's hard to find a thru-hiker who doesn't think about the trail at least a little each day for the first few years after the long walk. Many hikers describe trail flashbacks. 1 minute they're shopping for frozen pizza, the next they're on Rome Mountain. Ross Ridge Runner Gredian, a 1989 thru-hiker, said that weather changes take him back to different days on the trail. I can remember almost all of the 150 days on the trail, he said. After a while, some memories fade and names and places blur, to be replaced by a more general feeling for the trail. But even after decades, many details persist. Earl Schaefer and Gene Espy still speak of people and events on their thru-hikes more than 40 years ago. They make it sound like it happened yesterday. 4 years after his hike, Ross finds that he's still adjusting. The hardest part was beginning college right after his thru-hike. There were 10,000 people in an urban environment. In the dorm, I felt really enclosed. He expected to interact with people as he had on the trail, but he learned some hard lessons. I trusted people that manipulated me, he said. Like many hikers, he found it difficult to explain his trail experiences to others. But finally, he stopped talking about the trail and got on with his school life. He eventually found like-minded people to share his experiences. He now believes that the trail prepared him well for life. More than a decade after his thru-hike, Rick Hancock says that when he sees an AT slideshow, I get a lump in my throat and a tear in my eye. Rick retired his pack to a place of distinction. When I was on my own in an apartment, I kept it in the living room as a conversation piece. I still think about it almost every day, said David Bally, a 1989 thru-hiker. Lately, things pop into my head like flashbacks, just boom, I'm there. It's always a happy thought. I don't have any bad memories of it at all. As painful as the blisters were, the good outweighed the bad, for sure. After the trail and the abrupt change to a more sedentary life, a thru-hiker can expect to undergo some physiological changes too. Many suffer through periods of listlessness and lack of focus. Psychologist Thomas McNew draws parallels to long-distance runners. He says that the runner's high, the result, at least in part of the body's production of endorphins, may be applicable to thru-hikers too. The morphine-like endorphins, one of the body's responses to pain, are credited with inducing cheeriness in the face of adversity. Maybe that's why thru-hikers seem to be such an upbeat, energetic lot. After a thru-hike, the switch to a relatively sedentary lifestyle can throw a body for a loop. If exercise tends to cheer people up, the reverse may also be true. The biggest post-hike adjustment, however, is psychological. So many hikers expect to find out the answers to their problems, or at least to hone in on them and get them in perspective. But that doesn't always happen, said ATC's Gene Cashin. Sometimes they come off the trail and they're more puzzled than ever with what they want to do with their life. Although most thru-hikers adjust inside of a few months, some endure prolonged struggles. A handful have permanent problems. No one has studied the severe cases, but there are scattered stories of people who became unbalanced after the trail. One hears reports of schizophrenia and other serious ailments. It is reasonable to assume that people who are already severely troubled or prone to mental illness when they arrive at the trailhead might get a push in that direction from such an intense experience. Some hikers adjust by remaining active in the trail community. Some simply continue to backpack. Others maintain trails or become involved with clubs. Reese, the Sagwagon Lukai Jr., has served on the ATC Board of Managers. He, along with fellow 2,000 milers Ned Griest and Les Holmes, helped to develop a Boy Scout backpacking merit badge. Reese has been active in the American Hiking Society since 1977. Currently, he's in charge of developing the American Discovery Trail from the Pacific to the Atlantic. He hopes this will become the backbone of a national trail system comparable in scope to the interstate highway system. Another AT hiker, Rick Hancock, succeeded Reese as head of the Tidewater Appalachian Trail Club. "I'm still on the trail as often as I can be," said Rick. "The knowledge that I gained, I'm sharing with others. I'm trying to give something back for the pleasure hiking gave me." Profile: Dorothy Hanson. Few people have closer ties to the AT than Dorothy Hanson. A 1979 thru-hiker, she has been operating the mountain crossings at Wallasey Centre at Neels Gap, Georgia, with her husband Jeff since 1983. That same year, her father, Rex Pulford, died of a stroke on the AT while attempting a thru-hike. One morning I talked with Dorothy and Jeff, leaning over the counter of their store as hikers and other customers, their children Jamie and Chris, and their cat Custard, drifted in and out. Living on the trail can be a mixed blessing for a thru-hiker, but Dorothy Hanson has no qualms about it. The AT has long been in her blood. From the time she was 9 years old, her family travelled north from their home in Yankeetown, Florida, to hike along the AT. During their summer vacation trips, they do 3 or 4 mile hikes along the AT, over the years totaling about 1,000 miles. Despite her backpacking experience, Dorothy didn't come to the trail well prepared in 1979. Jeff, who has advised many thru-hikers and saved many trips over the last decade, said Dorothy was an unlikely candidate to complete the trail. She had a homemade backpack with a frame constructed of copper pipes soldered together. Her straps had no padding. For shelter, she had only a poncho, so her down bag was soaked each of her first 4 nights on the trail. Dorothy hiked in tennis shoes because she could find no women's hiking boots to fit her wide feet. In her favour, she carried a light load. Jeff said, "What Dorothy had was an awful lot of stick-to-itiveness." Of a thru-hike, Dorothy said, "I did it because I wanted to be alone, to answer some questions about myself. I'd always wanted to be a hermit, and I wanted to see if I could be alone for 5 months. But I started in April, and there must have been 100 people on the trail headed for Maine, so I quickly realised it wasn't going to be a hermitage. In fact, I remember writing home to my parents after the first week that I felt like I had to take a walk to get away from taking a walk. It was so crowded out here. I quickly realised that that was what was going to keep me going, that there were so many wonderful people out there. Instead of reinforcing my desire to be a hermit, it opened me up and made me more of a social creature. Everyone's so friendly and outgoing. As soon as they find out what you're doing, they just bend over backwards to take care of you. I came out of it with a real feeling of indebtedness. I wanted to repay everyone for the kindnesses. I remember my parents saying that if someone does something nice for you, the way to repay them is not necessarily to do something nice for them, but for somebody else. So it's nice to pass along some of what has been done for me." Toward the end of her walk, Dorothy was hiking with 2 other women when she saw Katahdin for the first time. They were all so happy to have the end in sight that they took off their packs and shoes and began dancing. One of the hikers slipped and dislocated her kneecap. She had to be flown out by helicopter 30 miles from the end. "I think that put the fear of God in all of us," Dorothy said. "From there on, we were almost too careful." Lesson learned, Dorothy was able to complete her thru-hike at Katahdin. I remember writing in my journal that I felt like lemmings out there. It's almost a biological urge to hike to Maine. Having talked to a number of repeat hikers, Dorothy said, "It seems that after the 2nd or 3rd time, it just gets better and better." Jeff doesn't understand that, perhaps because he hasn't hiked the trail. To him, you've done this trail once, why not go out and do the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail or the Long Trail? Why keep doing the Appalachian Trail? But I remember feeling when I got to the end that if I had the time and money, I would have hiked forever. It wouldn't necessarily have had to be the Appalachian Trail, but you do develop a love of the trail itself as an entity. People call it an escape. I say it's a running towards rather than a running away from. I can understand just wanting to do that forever. You just feel so good about yourself. Although Jeff hasn't done an AT thru-hike, he's an expert outdoorsman. He went to forestry school in Oregon and then led outdoor education programs in the West and Alaska. For 5 years, he spent 200 to 250 nights a year backpacking. He became a director of an outdoor school in northern Georgia. That's where he met Dorothy, who worked there after a thru-hike. Jeff said that when he led 6 or 7 week outdoor programs, they'd spend the last day or two talking about re-entry into the other world. He'd tell the hikers that no one but their immediate peers would be able to relate to their experience. You have these experiences that mean more to you than anything you've ever done in your life, and you'll bring them up at the dinner table and get blank stares back, at best. It was the hardest year of my life after I finished the trail, Dorothy said. I remember thinking, why am I not out there where the world makes sense, where my priorities are straight and I'm doing what I want to with my life? Part of it is that you need to talk about it and share what you've done with other people, and nobody cares. I had 1 week from the time I finished the trail till graduate school. I was a teaching assistant in a little cubbyhole with no windows or anything. Graduate school is such an artificial society. And all of a sudden, going from the great realities of food, water, rest and life to schedules and academia, it was really hard. I remember riding back and forth to school on my bike with tears rolling down my face thinking, what am I doing here? Growing up, I'd always felt a little bit of a misfit, that I didn't fit in. I think I came out of the AT still feeling a little bit of a social misfit in terms of the world at large, but you feel like you almost have a community of misfits, strong individualists, and it feels okay. You feel confirmed in your individuality. The aftermath of the hike wasn't all pain and disorientation, but also some powerful positive feelings. Part of it is short-lived, she said. You come out of it with the feeling that no matter what I wanted to do, I could do it because I had done that, the trail. A few years later, that starts to wear off after the world has a chance to get at you, but there's an inner core that stays there. You know you have done something wonderful, and no matter what happens from there, you've always got that. You can say, by gosh, I did it. A feeling of self-worth, of accomplishment. And also there is something, I'm agnostic, maybe atheist, there is something about being out there that makes you feel holy. Not necessarily in a religious sense, but part of something bigger than yourself. I remember walking along a ridge and seeing a beautiful rainbow through the mist. It was the most beautiful view I'd ever seen in my life, and the birds were singing, and I remember saying, thank you. I didn't know who I was saying thank you to. Sometimes when you're in the middle of business and life as usual, you think, what's it all about? You're born, you live, you die. What's the big deal? But when you're out there, you know why you're there, and you feel grateful to be there. Dorothy's father, Rex Pulford, attempted the thru-hike in 1983 at age 62. When I thru-hiked, my dad did it vicariously with me, Dorothy said. And when he retired, he decided he wanted to do the whole thing. He started off real early. It was March the 13th, which at the time was early. He ran into a lot of snow, but he had a good hike. On Max Patch Road, there were 6 inches of snow with high winds, so they took refuge from the trail. By the time he got up to North Carolina, he'd run into a group of people that he was hiking with off and on. At a clinic in Hot Springs, he had his blood pressure checked because he'd always had a high blood pressure. It was lower than it had been since he was a teenager. On April the 21st, he hiked north from Hot Springs. After eating lunch at the Rich Mountain Fire Tower with a group of hikers, he hiked a short distance north and a quarter mile past Hurricane Gap, died of a stroke. When he fell, Dorothy said, he must have called out. One of the young men who was just ahead of him came back and tried to resuscitate him, but had no luck. The hikers he'd been with decided to take his walking stick to Maine. They took turns carrying it, and eventually his walking stick made it all the way. I sometimes wonder where it is, Dorothy said. The hikers also carried his journal, taking turns, making entries, but Dorothy and Jeff haven't seen that either. Dorothy's mother, Betty, had been meeting Rex every few days to bring supplies and help with chores. After Rex's death, some people who lived close to the trail offered her a place to spend the night. There were a lot of hikers there, Dorothy said. It was a sad occasion, but my dad had always loved hikers and hiking so much, and I think all of us kept looking over our shoulders expecting to see him walk in. It was one of those things he would have liked so much, a gathering of really neat people. I've always said that when I go, I'd like to go that way, doing my life's dream. He'd always wanted to do the whole thing, ever since we first started doing short sections. Sometimes I wish he'd been able to get a little closer to Katahdin before he died, but then in a way that might have been worse, to be a few days from your goal and not make it. Later, with Sam Waddell's help, they erected a monument for Rex near Hurricane Gap. A half circle of irises borders the monument, and sometimes a hiker will plant wildflower seeds there. My mother never hiked the trail herself, but always loved the trail and wanted to do things for hikers, Dorothy said. When she got permission from the Forest Service to put a memorial stone up, she decided that instead of a vertical monument, she wanted a flat stone. That way, when the hikers come through, they'll have a place to cook a pot of hot chocolate or something. It's a continuation of that desire to help.